So we're talking about the type 3 today. We've already talked about type 2s, and we're on the second of the series with heart types with the beautiful type 3s. I'm Ashley. I'm a team development coach. I studied at the CP Enneagram Academy, and I've been using the Enneagram for my own inner work. I did the math today. It's actually been exactly a decade, but I didn't start actually taking it more than just the behavioral characteristics until 2017 at B. and Aranio's first workshop, which I only bring this up because that's the workshop I really felt like I understood more about the emotional depth of the type 3. And it was a really beautiful experience to see threes come alive and be in touch with themselves, their true self, in that space in 2017 in London. And I got to meet Scott at the same program at the CP Enneagram Academy. And he had this brilliant idea for this really quick resource for busy business professionals who love the Enneagram, but maybe they don't have time to remember all the gems and they just want a quick, it's just very three-like as I'm saying this out loud, just this quick communication tip or to understand the blind spot of different types. And so he had proposed the idea of collaboration with me. And Scott, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Scott Allender, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I do a lot of learning and development work with a particular passion for helping leaders become more radically self-aware and understand the impact and opportunity they have in the world. And one of the primary ways that I do this is with a lot of emotional intelligence coaching, and programmatic work. But nothing's been more transformative for me personally than the Enneagram. I started studying that in about 2014. And as Ashley said, we met a few years ago at CP Enneagram Academy event in California. And the funnest thing about the EnneaFlip project was that we were about halfway into its design before we realized that we weren't actually designing the same project. So we had a completely different ideas about what it was going to be. So we had to do a reset, but it turned out well. So
Yes, we had to bring in a head type mediator, which was per Helen Palmer's recommendation, which was really helpful.
I felt like you understood me, but we didn't.
Yeah, we needed a visual. Excellent. Well, Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about? I know most folks here are familiar with the Enneagram, but just as like a basis or understanding, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so the Enneagram, I think everybody here pretty much has some idea, but really, the Enneagram is a sense-making system, is how I like to think of it, right? So it takes 9 archetypes that exist in the world, and makes sense of their basic motivations, core desires, core fears, and how that impacts the way they see the world, the way they think, the way they feel, and then ultimately how that impacts the behaviors, how they show up. And the beauty of it, that I came to understand over time, and Ashley alluded to this earlier, is that far beyond just explaining personality traits, the Enneagram gives us a map for how to move beyond the limitations that we find ourselves in when we get stuck, when we all contain all 9 types, but we get stuck in one dominant type. And that dominant type helped us make sense of the world. It helped us find love and feel secure and navigate the complexity of our childhood stories. And it's all quite beautiful. But as Carl Jung said, what works for us in the morning of life will work against us in the afternoon. And the Enneagram helps us to see just how some of those ways of being stuck and seeing things from one dimension, from one possible 9 vantage points, keeps us limited. And that's the beauty of it. So it's to come in and to learn about a type and to learn about ourselves through the type, and then learn how we can move beyond it. Ashley, I don't know what you might want to add to that.
Oh, that's spot on. Thank you. Yeah, we already talked about the Enneaflip, but we essentially were pulling from this resource today as we go along our teaching. So, type 3, Enneagram 3. Some common names for the three. I know we use shapes as visual aids, but also it's helpful when we're learning about the Enneagram. What are people calling this Enneagram type? Well, some people call them the achiever, the performer, the shapeshifter. I've also heard chameleon, um, the bee, the busy bee. I know Suzanne Stabile, when she works in the foster care system, it's like never type kids, but in the foster care system, it's helpful. It's like, are you a monkey? Do you have a monkey mind? Are you a busy bee? And I love that animal actually for the type three, just thinking about them as a bee. And how do threes tend to show up? Well, yes, we know threes as being very success and goal oriented, but let's be real, they want to reach those goals, but mostly they want to look good while doing it. They know how to adapt their presentation to meet the eyes of their audience. So Beatrice Chestnut says that they have this natural marketing orientation where they can really quickly assess what someone or something or a group of people want, and they'll change their orientation based on what that person wants. So threes tend to be really successful, often at a young age, because they are really goal oriented. And not only are they goal oriented, but they often reach their goals and they know how to get there. They can cut corners to get there. They often exhaust their colleagues, their spouses, their children, their besties, people in their life, because when something that's good gets overdone, they have this one track mind and can lack that perspective. Although threes actually have a lot of great perspective and depth. And I think that's what people get wrong about a lot of threes. They're in the center of the heart type. So if you're looking at the Enneagram map right now, they are surrounded by two types that they have access to, because that's what wings mean. You can take on the characteristics of a two or a four really easily. When we're saying wings, we just said mean right now I'm dominant in type three, but I have a two wing, meaning I have easier access to the two characteristics at this point in my life. But no, you don't have to get stuck there. I say all this because threes are in the center of the heart types and quite emotional. But when you ask a three, well, what are you feeling? And Scott and I were just talking about this before and figuring out if you're a three versus a four or two. Threes have a really hard time identifying how they're feeling. And in truth, their coping strategy has been to not tune into their feelings, because tuning into your feelings, it takes a lot of time, and time could be spent elsewhere, right? So getting things done, reaching those goals that were set. One of the questions that we ask threes for people for typing interviews to determine if they're a three is, how important are goals to you? And often, most of the time, folks who are dominant in type three will say, oh, very important. Like that's everything. It's like how I structure my life. Some threes have a very competitive nature that can be quite ruthless and pragmatic, but not all threes. I think it's the counter type of the self-preservation three, which we'll talk about in a moment, that tends to be a little less competitive. But other threes, like when you think about the quintessential three, this story might not age well, but I think about Leslie Knope from Parks and Recreation, and that one episode where she's running for city council and she's behind this screen and they're asking a bunch of people, like, who are you going to vote for? Would you vote for this person or this person? And only one person on the panel says, like, oh, I wouldn't vote for her. And so she finds out all of these things about him. Like, he likes bowling, he likes beer. So she throws a voting party at a bowling alley where there's lots of beer, becomes buddy with this person in 20 minutes. And after, she goes, so will you vote for me? And he goes, no. And she goes, why? And he goes, well, you're a woman. And she's like, I can't change that. But I think about that because it's this like one track mind obsession. Like, I will get this person to adore and admire me. Scott, anything that you would like to add on, how do threes show up in the world?
Yeah, thank you. I identify as a three, and it took me months to get there, because typically when you hear threes discussed, you pretty much only hear the social three described, which is why it's going to be important for us to get into the other subtypes and to illuminate that threes can be much more complex. But I want to underscore something Ashley said about access to emotion, because one of the ways that I found my number was I was part of a men's group. It was more of um, a project that a friend of mine was running as part of his PhD program, and he had several men in the room, and part of the idea was to explore how men tend to get in touch with emotion. So day one was just look at these sort of 8 feelings, 8 emotions on the wall, and just say the one or two that you're feeling right now, and then move on. No context, no explanation, just do it. I found myself sitting in that room, and before other people spoke, even though I didn't know most of those people, I kind of felt almost intuitively that I had an idea of which word or words they were going to say. Now, I wasn't right 100% of the time, of course, but I kind of got a quick sense of what other people were feeling. And yet I couldn't come to the word for myself. I couldn't find it. And that set me off on a pretty dark night of the soul when I left that room, to try to think, what is it going on, and there's a lot of story that follows that, but I just want to underscore that threes use heart, they use feeling to understand what's expected of them, to understand what other people are experiencing, to sort of bring that wisdom into a room, all the while, because they're so outwardly focused on what those expectations are, right? What is the culture? What is the nuance of the room? That they move away from what they're experiencing and they just try to adapt. And what they're trying to find is a sense of worth, because three's biggest
Mhm.
fear is that they have no worth separate from what they do. So they sort of put off their own needs and feelings in that way, and chase after your approval as a substitution for feeling okay for just being.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I have a lot of empathy for all types, but just focusing in on three, you know, being in Western culture, we are known for what we do and we're praised for what we do. So when the Enneagram says, like, be authentic and do less and sit still, it's like, are you kidding me? It's like, I'm like so muscular because I've been like swimming upstream and doing all this stuff. And I just like that you underscored that piece of this image driven person, like that, putting on that persona has to do with, like if people see me, what if I am inadequate? What if I
Mm-hmm.
don't even like me? Like I think I'm more familiar with my image than I am with me.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that threes grapple with as they do start to put down that mask, start dissolving the ego and getting in touch with that veracity or true self.
And as you alluded to, in America, that's no easy task. Being a three in America is like being, an alcoholic that works in a bar. It's tough to because you're going to get it praised, right? You're going to likely be successful if you're all in with your three superpower, and it's tough to then say, well, why would I want to move beyond that?
The genius of the type three. They're often quite influential, inspiring. They showcase the benefit of presenting more polished. They gain respect and prestige from people, their environments quite easily. They have a really powerful drive to achieve and show tangible results. So they not just talk; they'll show up and follow through. Really responsible people. Um, and then the people around them, they benefit from this and that one track mind, competitive nature that I had mentioned. And then when that gets overdone, the need to gain adoration of others gets unmet and emotions aren't being tended to. I think about a garden that's getting overly weeded. The weeds start to, suck out the nutrients and the life of the plants that you're trying to cultivate. And the three can, they go into overdrive for fulfilling their projection quota on whatever that looks like. It could look like working over weekends, moving too quickly. And really, what happens is that loss of perspective. So, what's really important in your life? Um, how are you going to define success? Where do you want to be when you're 80? So, when they're overdoing that superpower, that genius, that perspective gets lost, and they end up doing relationships and doing daily life instead of being in relationships and being in daily life. Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about self-deceit and veracity?
Yeah. So understanding passion. The passion of the type is important for understanding how to transcend the limitations of type that we've been referencing. So each type, in case you're unfamiliar, has something known as the passion of the type. Now, that could seem like a good thing because we talk about passion in a very positive way, right? I'm passionate about golfing, or I'm passionate about skiing, or what have you. But the passion of a type is the dominant emotion that overtakes all other experiences and emotions, right? It's think of it as a crime of passion. It's all consuming. And to start to observe the ways in which that all consuming emotional vice is running the show, that's step one towards seeing its negativity, or its hurtfulness, or the ways that it's limiting you, or hurting other people in unintended ways. And so for the three, the passion is self-deception. Um, and the self-deception for a three is that they believe that they're being sincere with all the little chameleon-like subtle shifts that they do. So when they adapt and sort of take on a slight different conversational style with one group and then a humor style with another group, they don't think they're being insincere. They think they're being authentic. And the greatest, biggest self-deception that they have is that they're not an emotional type. Ashley referenced this earlier, but at the center of the heart types, they are the most emotional. And people often question that and say, what about fours? Fours have the most access to their emotion, but threes actually have the most. They're actually the most emotional type on the Enneagram. Now, the below that on that slide, it's actually the sort of mental fixation. Some people say I'm sorry, this is the
Yeah,
emotional
it should say
virtue.
virtue. Yes.
Virtue, yeah. So the virtue is the exact opposite of the passion. The virtue is the truest expression of type. So as we move up in our levels of awareness about who we truly are, and we reclaim the essence of the things that we lost because we put on our mask and we lived our story to survive our complex lives. But when we can shed all that and start to return to our truest selves, we're reclaiming what's known as the virtue of type. And so the virtue of type is veracity for three, or authenticity. Threes entered the world likely wanting to be and just very honest and authentic, and discovered in their story that that wasn't an okay way to be. And so they started to be overcome by the passion of self-deception and start to adapt and be a chameleon. But what they covet most is to actually be just who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about instincts. And so Scott had just mentioned virtue and then emotional passion. So if you're looking at this psyche map of personality, you have personality below, which is personality is not who we are. It's our ego, it's our characteristics, it's that emotional passion that Scott was talking about. And really, what we want to learn how to do is pull into that true or higher self, that virtue, which is veracity for the type 3. So talking about instincts, the reason we're spending time on this is because if you want to use the Enneagram for growth, you're going to want to learn about the instincts, because this is the first step to deeper transformative work. And so we're going to be talking about how these three instincts show up in the type 3. So a brief overview is the one-to-one or sexual instinct is about bonding or to one-to-one interactions. So it can do with bonding with nature, connecting with your medium. Like when I say medium, it could be like a photography or painting, or maybe it's work. It could be supporting someone else in their success. But these people are really good at this like one-on-one interaction. One-to-one types also tend to show up a little bit more aggressive, and depending on what their Enneagram type is. And then the social instinct. This instinct focuses on attention and shapes their behavior around belonging and recognition. So it's this herd mentality. Where am I at in the herd? Am I the leader? Am I second in command? And I want to make sure that I have a place and will work really hard to be in community. And then the self preservation instinct focuses attention on and shapes their behavior around material security. So they direct energy towards safety concerns, including, having enough resources. Some examples could be having a 401k, taking your multivitamin every day, like making sure your body's up to snuff and like working out or grooming. Although grooming can also be the like one-to-one instinct and social instinct. Again, it just has to do with that like deeper motivation. That's actually a good example for the different types. Like a social type might groom or look really nicely because that's what the group expects of me. A self-preservation dominant type, that instinct might come up because it's like, oh, I need to make sure that like, I'm moisturizing my body because my skin needs to stay, healthy. And then the one-to-one instinct, it's like, oh yeah, like I show up in this like attractive manner because that's is received well from someone else. And we're not going to talk about these guys today, but good stuff for another time. And we're just going to dive right in talking about the three subtypes of the Enneagram. So the type 3. So a subtype is the emotional passion of a dominant type mixed with an instinct. And Scott, I'll let you talk about those.
Yeah. So what happens essentially is that all three of these instincts are meant to be in balance, but for whatever reason, in our lived experience, one of them gets out of balance. We feel that we won't have a certain need met, so we turn up the focus, and instead of that instinct firing when we need it to, it's firing all the time. It becomes the dominant instinct, and it steals energy from the other instincts. And what happens, as Ashley said, it combines with the passion of the type, and you end up with three very different varietals of each Enneagram type. So for the three, self-preservation, this is known as the counter type. Now, what I mean by that is for two of the dominant instincts, they flow in harmony with the passion of the type, right? They're not at odds with one another. But there's one dominant instinct that is in conflict with the passion, and it creates a sort of tension. And so for a 3, we talk about 3s wanting to be and look successful and avoid a failure at all costs. But a self-preservation dominant instinct is my body okay? Am I safe? Do I have what my physical needs are? Are they being met, right? So Naranjo called these types security. And they not only want to look good, they want to be good. And in this way, the sort of the vanity of the 3 is expressed as a vanity for having no vanity. I believe that was, I don't know if that was Naranjo or Chestnut that said it, but I think that's a great way to explain it. They want others to view them as attractive and successful, but they don't want anyone to know that they want this. They try to really speak the truth, but often get confused about the image-based reasons for why they do things. Mm-hmm. They experience more anxiety than the other 3s, as they often work harder than any other type. I think it was Aranio Pais who said that when the self-pres 3 stops, it can feel like they're dying inside. And this self-pressure combined with attention to how they're being perceived, while also wanting to be ethical and good, puts a lot of internal pressure on their operating system. I once upon a time as a self-preservation 3 bought a BMW, and for 3 years I had this massive love-hate relationship with it, and I eventually said, I can't drive around in this thing. I got to get rid of it. This doesn't fit what I want to project on any level. At the same time, there was certain groups of people that I was around that I liked the way it felt. So it was a problem for me. So social 3s. Now, again, I mentioned this earlier. This is the type that you mostly hear described in books or online. But it's just the one of the 3 varietals. Naranjo called these types prestige. So they desire to be seen and to have influence with people. They act out their vanity through a desire to shine before the whole world. They're the most vain of the three subtypes and the biggest chameleon. That doesn't make them bad people. By the way, again, there's no good or bad. It's just a reality that they fall into that trap more than the other ones. Socially brilliant, I would say. They know how to talk to people and climb the social ladder more than the other two types of threes. They can often sell and market themselves or whatever product they wish to. If you've got a sales force in your business, hire a social three. Potentially they will get it done. They may keep people at a distance more than the other ones in order to maintain their positive image, right? So they might keep you back a little bit, because if you get too close beneath the veneer, you might see something that you might see behind the curtain a little bit. And so they might keep you more distance. And they're the type that's probably be the most in denial about them being an emotional type. And then finally, the 1-to-1 3. Naranjo called these masculinity and femininity. The goal of the sexual three, or the 1-to-1 3, is of sex appeal and beauty rather than money or prestige. They can be more sweet and a little more shy than the other two threes. Tend to focus on others that they want to support. So may not seem like a three because they're not so focused on their own status and achievement, but more on being attractive and supporting others. In this way, they can actually look very two-ish. And they are the most emotional of the three types of threes, and yet can often experience a feeling of emptiness or disconnection from others. They may be far more in touch with the sadness that runs below the surface for all heart types. Ashley, anything you want to add?
Oh, that was so great. And just a quick touching on instinct sequences that you had talked about is the goal is to get these instincts balanced. So you have all three, no matter what Enneagram type you are, just like you have all 9 types, but trying to figure out like which one is, feels like it has most control over me. And which is like a close second, maybe it's, and then which one is your last one that you want to learn how to cultivate and access more. And then you already touched on counter types. So this is when the emotional passion of your type is actually in conflict with your dominant instinct. So you might look like a little bit of a different flavor of that Enneagram type. So this is how it looks like visually. Let's just say I'm dominant in self-preservation. And 1-to-1 is my second. In social, I don't even know how to access that. I actually don't have a community or friends really. It's because, I'm taking time, working hard and taking care of myself. Or you might, hear Scott's examples like, oh my gosh, the 1-to-1 instinct is definitely my dominant one. And I don't even see the other two in hindsight. So your bubbles might look like that. Or here's one where like I'm in between two, the social and self-preservation seem like my top two, but kind of slightly more social. And again, when you're working with a coach, an Enneagram coach, the first step is trying to figure out like, okay, how do you make that one that's dominant smaller? And the goal is balance, like Scott said. So let's get to why we're here to hear from our 3 panelists. So if you are not on the panel, if you could please turn off your camera and audio. And if you are on the panel, we want to see you and your beautiful faces. And so come on camera, come off audio. And we're so excited to hear about your experience being a 3. I know that was a lot too. So 3 is like, take a breath. We just, put all your dirty laundry out there. So thank you for being here. The first question is, what is your experience living out your Enneagram type? And also if you want to introduce yourselves, share about, what's it like being a type 3 and who are you?
Are we going in any order or should I just jump in?
This is the social experiment. Scott and I like the type groups to organize themselves and come up with their own decisions.
Okay, well, I'll just jump in with it then. My name is Jenna Ross, and I'm definitely a 3. If there was any question going back over that content, it is confirmed. Yeah, and any additional information you want me to share up front around myself, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, if you just, yeah, whatever you want to share, and then maybe your experience with being a type 3, if you
Sure.
have a story or an example, like Scott's like, oh yeah, I went to this men's group and I
Yeah,
didn't know what I
yeah.
was feeling.
Yeah, I think so. The first thing that comes to mind is when I first was learning about the Enneagram and was reading about this, and just how exposing it was when I read through the Enneagram 3, because it had been very much my reality. So much so that even when I was young, growing up, I had this assessment within myself that I would go through periodically to make sure I was okay, to assess how do my friends feel about me? How does my family feel about me? How am I doing in school? How am I doing in work? I almost had this checklist of assessments to see if I'm doing okay in all those areas and I'm being successful, then me, myself, am okay. So that started really early, and I think is a really practical, maybe clear picture as to how that played out in my life. And of course, that continued on, and I had a little bit more awareness as I became an adult. But so much of my identity had been based on achievements. Was I successful in these areas, and was I presenting in a positive way? And yeah, again, that continued. And fortunately, I've grown and changed since then in some ways, but it is very instinctive for me.
Thank you, Jenna.
I'll go next, I guess. My name is Mike Young, and I'm based in California, and I work in a family business, fourth generation family, and I work with my whole family, my dad, my uncle, my two cousins, my brother. I mean, it's a true family business, and we've been around a while. And so, as far as I can remember, not knowing what the Enneagram was as a child, I've always been a 3. One of my earliest memories is a friend of mine. It was like third or fourth grade, and we're standing in line, and I probably wanted to stand in the front of the line. And he was like, "Mike, why are you so competitive? You always have to be first." And I that's just something that has stuck in my mind forever. And I've always got, my wife calls, I wear this cape, and it's called, on the back of it, it's called the What Next cape, because Mike's always wondering what's next. He can't sit still, always got to be doing something. And so I'm constantly trying to shed my what's next cape to be a better 3, but it's always close by. Also, this is so sad to say, but when my kids were little, when we would play games, I wouldn't let them win. And who doesn't let their child try to win a game, right? Me. Yes. Thank you, Jessica. And Casey. See, I feel comfortable here. Thank you for putting this together, Scott and Ashley. This is making me feel real good about myself. But here's a great story about a total 3. This was early on in my career, coming back and working in the family business. And I'd just gotten out of college, and it was the first, we were buying another business. And it was the first deal that I got to really negotiate with myself, with my dad by my side. And we were in a conference room at an attorney's office, like in the last minute of like negotiating this huge deal that was going to be a big windfall for our family and kind of move us on. And like, we were halfway through the meeting, and my dad just got up and left. And I was like, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Hallie," which is my child, my middle one, "Hallie's got a volleyball game. I'm out of here. I'm gonna go watch her volleyball game." I was like, I was I was pissed, and I was frustrated. I felt like my dad was being inefficient and lazy, and because this was a huge deal for us, and he was going to go watch my kids volleyball game. In hindsight, as I look back on that situation now, I'm like, I see why you did it. That was because that was the right thing to do, not to schedule a meeting right in the middle of your kids volleyball game. But that was one story in working with the family that really stands out to me. And yeah, as I reflect back to, I think I found, as I've gone through life, that I much prefer to be admired than liked, which it sounds kind of weird, but when I get admiration, like especially from even to this day from my mom and dad, it's like the biggest dopamine hit ever. And I'm 50 years old. So there's something weird about like I need a lot of friends, but I don't need them to like me. I want them to admire me for the things I've done and really not necessarily who I am. So that's what it's like for me living as a 3.
That's really good sharing, Michael. That's really helpful. Thank you. I've heard that before from other 3s on that admiration as well. And I think that's a distinction that you sometimes hear from 2s, where they might say they want to feel liked, and a 3 wants to maybe feel admired. Thank you for sharing that. Who wants to go next?
I can go. So I'm Steph, and I do basically communication consulting using the Enneagram. And I am a sexual type 3. And it's really interesting because for a long time, I didn't really resonate with that at all. I thought I was social because I was like, yeah, image is huge for me, obviously. Then I thought I was self-preservation for a little bit. But then I started to recognize, like, actually in my behavior, how it plays out. Like, any sort of self-promotion makes me want to puke, which is how I know I'm not a social 3, because I feel like the social 3 is so comfortable being like, yeah, look at these things I'm great at. And for me, I just want to go hide under a rock. That does not feel comfortable. But when I was a kid, I remember there was this musical artist that had this like record album, whatever, that came out. She was 12. Okay. So at the time, or maybe she was 10, I can't remember exactly. At the time, I think I was 8. I was like, okay, if I want to be like this musician, I have until, I'm 11 or 12 or whatever. Like, I was comparing myself against that as the bar of like, this is how I will know that like I am like doing the right thing, basically, is if I kind of hit that. And I, like earlier, I think Ashley, when you were talking about the goal thing, something, or maybe it was Scott, I can't remember exactly, but when I think about goals, I think of it more in that sort of thing. It's more like a thought, and then I kind of just figure out how to make it happen. But it's always about, how do I get that result or that metric, less so about the experience. And even as a younger kid, I played sports or whatever, but I specifically chose not a sport that my older sister played because I didn't want to be compared. I didn't want to have to compete and know that, oh, I might not be that good at it. Like, I might not be as good at as she was. So I chose something else. So just recently I started playing softball in a league that's fairly competitive. Like, it's all adults, but everyone on my team is like a physical therapist. So basically they all play sports. I'm not good at it because when I was in 5th grade, I struck out in T-ball one time and I never touched a bat again. So now I'm going out and playing softball and doing this thing that I'm so bad at. And I have plenty of stories to share if we want to talk about. And it's just been really interesting, like all of my reactions and all of the emotion and all of the processing that's happening around it. And recently I just told my husband, I was like, you have to give me some like grace here because I'm doing something I suck at every week, and that is excruciating. And so, yeah, I think that's like one of the main ways that being a type 3 shows up. And with the sexual and then self-preservation secondary, I think it's like the opposite almost in some ways, even though, what Mike said, I resonate with a lot. The way that it comes out for me is really opposite because that's my last instinct. That's it.
Good on you for doing something that you're not very good at in a public social setting.
People can see me.
I love that, if I might say, because sometimes people ask me, well, so what does growth work look like? And that's like a perfect example of, what it looks like? It looks like sucking at softball and picking up a bat as a 3, right? As a 3, it looks like doing that. I so applaud you doing that. I think that's a beautiful example of stepping into uncomfortable places.
Well, I'm uncomfortable for you, and I'm not doing
Thank you.
it. It sounds rough.
Casey, tell us about your experience being a 3.
Sure. So Casey Cronquist, I serve as the president of the Blueberry Council out here in California. And I think as a 3, I'm inclined to share that with you first and describe who I am. But I'm sure I also have to make sure that everybody understands that it's also not a part-time job. It's actually a full-time job. If people like to wonder, like the berry business, is that really a full-time job? It's a full-time job, and I really enjoy it. But it's been through this position where I've gotten exposed. So I haven't really been a part of the Enneagram community or following it prior to starting here. And my motivation to do that was, yes, to find myself, but as a true 3, it was like I needed to build culture. I needed to find a process or a system that would help my community, my team, be a better team. And there's lots of things like the Enneagram out there, but I working with Andrea Walters, who's actually on the call, we felt like this was a good direction, and she may have had better insights on how it would be good for me than I really had vision for how it would be good for me, because I was doing it as a way of achieving my goal, which was better culture. It wasn't about me. It was about, I wanted to try and build this great team. And so fast forward to today, I've accepted that I'm a 3, and that it's clear that it's true, because as I read what the core weaknesses were, I was feeling very exposed. That's how I knew I was a 3. I skipped this. It's like reading a proposal. You skip to the bottom. You just want to see what the number is. I'm not so concerned about the details. And yet when I read those core weaknesses, I was just like, this is really uncomfortable. And nobody was even with me reading it. Like, I was just reading this document that told me what I was not good at it. And I thought, that's how I knew I was a 3. And just the feelings that it created in me on just insecurity, uncomfortableness, like, I'm not this chameleon thing. Like, what are they talking about? And it was absolutely all those things that I am, that I do. And, as my go back kind of, as Mike was talking about, his childhood, my wife will now was bringing up before the Enneagram that I am the golden boy in my family. So there's about 15, 16 of us cousins, and I'm the oldest, but I'm also the best in the minds of all of my family members and in my own mind. And so this golden boy complex started when I was very young, because I was the first. And then, that whole thing has kind of manifested itself all the way through my life, to the point where my wife calls it something. And it's about being a good kid, good grades, college, president of organizations, just industry accolades, whatever I can do to just maintain this status that, may have preceded me in just my own thinking about it, but it's what has now manifested itself in my life. And so I'm just driven to be successful. It's the encouragement, it's the affirmation. It's like Mike said about his parents, like, that's the dopamine. I just got an award for being the Association Industry Leader of the Year for agriculture. And I wanted my mom and dad to know about it. I wanted them to, be the ones that, heard first, and that praise still drives me and my motivations. And it's eerie to think about how much the type 3 really describes who I am. And so fast forward, this has actually been a great journey for me personally, because at work, even though I was doing it for them, doing it for me, it has been a lot about me understanding who I work with as me, because I'll typically walk into the room and change myself to adapt to whatever audience I'm needing to relate with. And when you're doing that with employees who have their own types, which then you learn about, the 3 is not really as intentional as some of the other types need you to be in order for them to move a project forward. So, I got to know the type 6 and type 9, kind of in my arrows area, working with 9 and a 6. And where it really showed up, and I could see where I was moving really too fast for a 6 and would do things that would just be painful for a 6, but I'm a 3 and I wasn't going to relate to that. I'm also the boss. And I feel like that personality just rolls right over people who have less concern about getting to the goal and more concern about how we're going to get there. And I also think about the equipment needs. Like somebody said, actually it might have been Ashley, but there's this connection of like where 3s feel like they can lend a hand in God's work. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm going to change this in the world and it's all going to come true. And there's not anything that, if he needs me, I can't help him with that, we're going to get accomplished here and I'll make it happen. And, but it's strange and it's also not true, right? It's like this ego of like what we think we're accomplishing on his behalf or on our own behalf that we're intersecting as part of our existence. And it's just hard because it doesn't lend itself to peace. It doesn't lend itself to space. What I have to really work on is, I don't need my calendar to be full to be successful. Actually, I need my calendar to have less in it to be successful. And it's kind of not so much about maybe going as far as joining a softball team that I suck at, or more of just like, how do I just not calendar everything for a day and just sit with what I've created, even if it's a mess, and just sit in it and accept it. And I let the day-to-day drive so much of my, or I should say, I let so much of my drive for accomplishment drive that day-to-day, and the perception I expect people to see of it, whether it's literally the calendar that my team sees that I'm on. Those are also the dopamine hits that, I'm trying to show them, like, this is how we work. It's not good. And I've had to like work hard, in trying to find my own softball scenario to pull back on and them see me grow away from that natural tendency. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And Casey, as you're sharing, I just want to mirror back too, as you're talking about your experience of being a 3 and even a social 3, you opened in saying like, I just wanted to learn about the Enneagram for my team. And then even talking about someone who's like a type 9 and type 6 on your team and how they're connected. It's very like community driven. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Jessica.
I'm Jessica Taylor, and I identify as a 3 with a wing 4, but really the subtypes really made things come alive for me because I didn't necessarily always feel so much of the identification until the security piece came in there. I'm like, that's it. Because on tests can misidentify as a 1 just being process driven, or as a 6 being anxious, or those things. And so I think just drilling down has been really helpful. A story to kind of illustrate, I had a new set of team members that kind of ported over to my team, and they got together at a time when we were giving feedback, and they asked, like, do you expect us to run how you run? And I was like, oh, no, don't do that. That's not a good thing. But they just like, the pace was a pace where they knew, like, you're not telling us to do it, but we're watching you do it. And so just realizing more about my leadership of what does that look like when you're modeling going 100 miles an hour? And I often say, like, I only have 100, and then it's full sloth mode, like straight over to the 9, don't talk to me. So there isn't a 55 mile an hour. And so I think that kind of illustrates what it looks like for me. And something that was actually helpful is I have always been a person that had a ton of jobs, probably because of the security need. So even as an entrepreneur that has my own business, I still keep like full-time W-2 jobs as side hustles because, that makes sense. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a side hustle. And they're like, but it's full-time and you're like a vice president. I'm like, yeah. But yeah, just you don't need to know what I do. And so it's funny when people ask what I do, and I'm like, I do stuff with leadership because I've got like 5 jobs, but I don't want to tell everybody about that because I know it's weird, but the security piece in me really needs that. And so one of the ways I kind of came to terms with that in some ways was realizing that it was a capacity thing where I am ridiculously loyal, but I also get really bored really quickly. Like I can crush it and accomplish something. And then I'm like, what's next? So then I just like collect the jobs like little friends. I'm like, oh, there's another job. There's another job. And then convince people that they should let me do it. And then they do. So it's very like weird in this thing where I'm like, don't ever follow what I do. I would never write a book or say like, if I can do it, you can do it. Cause I'm like, no, it's not necessarily normal, but it's super fun. And I realized, I think when I kind of was doing my work around, like, why do you do that? Other than the fact that the security need is so high, because I don't want the microphone. I don't want the spotlight about it. I just want to kind of be on the grind and do it. But I realized I have like a swimming pool capacity. And then every job feels like a thimble. And then I'm like, but I have so much more to give, and it will like waterboard these people if I pour it out on them. So then I have to find another container and another container. And so I finally found like, hey, I have all these containers and I feel like healthfully depleted at the end of the